Have you ever felt like there's a part of you that doesn't belong? A side of yourself you don't show to others, maybe not even to yourself. Something beneath the surface. It might come out in moments of stress, or fear, or jealousy. It might appear when you're alone and your mind starts to wander to thoughts you wish you didn't have. We all have it. That hidden version of ourselves. The part that doesn't get posted, praised, or polished. Carl Jung called it the shadow. And the shadow isn't something rare or pathological. It's part of the human experience. It's not some strange thing reserved for people with deep psychological problems. It's you. It's me. It's all of us. It's the part of our psyche that contains the things we've repressed or denied, not just the parts we consider bad, like anger, greed, or envy, but also the things we were told not to be. Too loud, too sensitive, too ambitious, too emotional. As children, we learned very quickly what parts of us were welcomed and what parts brought punishment or shame. And so, to survive, we cut ourselves in half. We put away what was unacceptable. We tucked it into the basement of our psyche, hoping it would never come back up. But it does. It comes up when we snap at someone we love. When we're consumed by envy at someone else's success. When we secretly hope someone fails. When we sabotage a relationship just when it gets real. When we procrastinate on the very thing we want most. That's the shadow. Unseen but fully present. Think about how many movies we love that show this struggle. Bruce Wayne has Batman. Dr. Jekyll has Mr. Hyde. Walter White, the quiet chemistry teacher, transforms into Heisenberg. Why do we resonate so deeply with these stories? Because they speak to the war within us. There's a quote from Jung that goes, "How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole." And it's so true. Your shadow is proof that you are human, that you are multidimensional, that you have depth. But here's the danger. When we spend our lives pretending our shadow doesn't exist, it doesn't disappear. It just acts out in unconscious ways. It leaks into our relationships. It shows up in judgment. It manifests in emotional numbness or even physical illness. In fact, research over the past decade has started to confirm what Jung observed all those years ago. Suppressing emotions, especially the ones we label as negative, can actually increase stress hormones in the body. It weakens the immune system. It increases anxiety and depression. So by denying our shadow, we're not protecting ourselves. we're slowly unraveling. And here's the paradox. The more we try to appear good, the more our unacknowledged darkness takes control. The more we suppress our rage, the more we explode in traffic or lash out at someone over something small. The more we deny our envy, the more we sabotage others in subtle, unconscious ways. That doesn't make us bad. It makes us fragmented. The shadow isn't evil. It's just everything that didn't fit into the mask we were told to wear. Some of us were raised to believe that being angry was wrong. So we became passive, polite, agreeable. But anger still lived within us. It just got buried. And maybe now it's turned inward. It's become self-criticism, fatigue, or that quiet resentment that builds over time. Others were told not to outshine people, so we made ourselves small. We gave up our dreams to make others comfortable. But that ambition, that fire, it didn't die. It just moved into the shadow, waiting to be reclaimed. And the real tragedy is this. The shadow doesn't only contain what we fear. It also contains what we need. Our voice, our strength, our creative instincts, our boldness. The things that could make us whole. So, if there's a part of you that feels misunderstood, if you sometimes behave in ways that even confuse yourself, if you have thoughts that scare you, or desires that seem wrong or inappropriate, you're not alone. You're just human. And your shadow is calling you, not to punish you, but to help you remember the parts of yourself you've forgotten. The poet Robert Bly once described the shadow as the long bag we drag behind us. Every time we're told that something about us is too much, not enough, or just unacceptable, we stuff it into that bag. Over time, it gets heavy. But the weight isn't the problem. The problem is that we never stop to open the bag and see what's inside. Jungian shadow work is about finally turning around and looking at what we've been dragging. It's about unzipping the bag, not to dwell in pain, but to finally understand it, to learn from it, to integrate it. Because here's the truth. Everything you've buried still has a role to play in your becoming. And the shadow? It's not just the darkness you hide. It's also the doorway to your light. It's the first step toward living a life that isn't based on image, but on truth. Not on perfection, but on wholeness. And once we understand that, we can begin the real work. We can start listening to what our shadow has been trying to say all along. Because what we repress controls us, but what we face transforms us. And maybe, just maybe, your shadow isn't trying to hurt you. Maybe it's trying to lead you back to yourself. Let's talk about how it already shapes your life in ways you may not even realize. It's easy to think of the shadow as something hidden in the background, something that only comes out during a breakdown or in moments of crisis. But the truth is, your shadow shapes you every single day, even when you don't notice it, especially when you don't notice it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Let that settle for a moment. So many of the things we think are just the way life is, are actually patterns born from parts of ourselves we haven't fully faced. That deep insecurity in relationships, the constant self-doubt at work, the way we pull away from opportunities we actually want. These things don't come from nowhere. They're echoes of the shadow. Think about your relationships. Have you ever overreacted to something small? A comment, a look, a text, not answered fast enough? That sudden emotional charge? That flood of hurt or anger? That's often your shadow being triggered. Maybe you were abandoned in the past. Maybe your needs were minimized or mocked. And so now, when someone makes you feel invisible, even slightly, the shadow wakes up. It says, "See, you were never enough. You're still not safe." And suddenly, you're spiraling. But the person in front of you, they're just running 5 minutes late. We blame others. We blame ourselves. But rarely do we stop and ask, is this reaction about the present? Or is it the past bleeding through me again? That's the shadow in real time. And it doesn't just show up in love. It appears in our careers, too. Think about how often we self-sabotage. You get a great opportunity, and you freeze. You procrastinate. You tell yourself you're not ready. Or maybe you're offered praise, and you dismiss it. You downplay it. Why? Because somewhere in the shadow, there's a voice that says, "You're not worthy. You'll never measure up." And that voice, it's old. It's ancient. It might have started in childhood, from a parent, a teacher, an environment that made you feel small. That message got internalized. And now, without realizing it, you recreate the same rejection over and over. That's the tragic brilliance of the shadow. It keeps us safe by keeping us stuck. It would rather we remain in the known, even if the known is painful. We see this in perfectionism, in avoidance, in addiction, in burnout. So many of our coping mechanisms aren't just habits. They're defenses against what we're afraid to feel. And the thing is, the shadow doesn't always come wearing a scary face. Sometimes it comes disguised as our strengths. Maybe you're the helper, always there for others, never asking for anything in return. Sounds noble, right? But what if that's your shadow, disguising your fear of being a burden? What if it's hiding your belief that your worth depends on being needed? Or maybe you're fiercely independent. You never ask for help. You pride yourself on doing everything alone. But what if that's your shadow's way of protecting you from the pain of past abandonment? The shadow is subtle like that. It doesn't just hide what we dislike. It also hides the wounds that taught us who we had to become. Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And when we refuse to face ourselves, we suffer, not only in silence, but in confusion. Because the life we want always feels slightly out of reach. We chase things, we lose interest. We find love, then push it away. We start something new, then sabotage it, again and again. And the worst part? We don't know why. The research on self-sabotage has caught up with Jung in the last few decades. Studies now show that the unconscious mind influences nearly 95% of our behavior. That means most of our decisions, reactions, and patterns are not actually made from conscious, rational thought, but from the scripts buried deep inside us. Scripts we didn't write. They were written by trauma, by society, by parents who didn't know better, by peers, experiences, pain. And unless we rewrite them, we'll keep repeating them, forever calling it bad luck or just how I am. But here's the shift. Once you begin to observe the shadow at work in your life, something changes. You start to see where your patterns are coming from. You begin to understand the moments that used to feel chaotic or confusing. That inner critic? It's not the truth. It's the echo of an old wound. That avoidance? It's not laziness. It's fear of failure or fear of success. That anger? It's not you being too much. It's a signal that your boundaries have been crossed for far too long. Your shadow is always trying to speak to you. And when you ignore it, it screams. But when you listen, it softens. That's why awareness is the first step. Just noticing how your shadow shows up in your moods, your relationships, your decisions, begins to loosen its grip. It moves from unconscious to conscious. And suddenly, you're no longer a puppet on strings. You're a person with a choice. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's the real path to growth, not chasing constant positivity, not faking happiness, but facing the parts of ourselves we were taught to reject. So if you've ever felt like your life is on repeat, if you've asked yourself, why do I keep ending up here? It's not because you're broken. It's because something inside you is still waiting to be seen, still trying to get your attention. And maybe, just maybe, that's the part of you that holds the key to your healing. Not the perfect part, not the strong part, but the part you buried, the part that holds the truth of what you've survived and what you still need. Let's talk now about what happens when we finally stop running from that part and begin the journey of making peace with it. What would happen if we embraced our shadow instead of fearing it? What if the parts of us we've been running from were never our enemies, but our teachers? Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And it's true. Because the moment you stop editing who you are, the moment you stop trying to cut out the pieces that make you uncomfortable, is the moment the real work begins. You meet yourself, not the version you present to the world, but the one who cries in private, the one who lashes out when scared, the one who carries shame, rage, jealousy, grief, the one who's still hurting from things that happened decades ago. And it's hard. It's confronting. It's not the glamorous kind of healing that gets shared on social media, but it's real. It's raw, and it's yours. See, the shadow isn't some dark monster lurking beneath your surface. It's the accumulation of everything you were told not to be, everything you had to push down to survive, every emotion that wasn't safe to express, every need that was dismissed, every part of you that was labeled too much or not enough. And when you start to embrace it, you begin to realize the shadow isn't evil. It's just unheard. Take anger, for example. Most of us were raised to think anger is wrong, that we should calm down, stay polite, be nice. But what if your anger is sacred? What if it's there to protect your boundaries? What if it's alerting you that something is unjust or deeply misaligned? Your shadow holds that wisdom. It holds your grief, the one that was never witnessed, the one that says, "That really hurt." It holds your longing for love, for safety, for belonging, the parts of you that ache but were never allowed to speak. So what would happen if we finally let them speak? This isn't about glorifying pain. It's about making room for the full range of your humanity. Because the truth is, you can't selectively numb emotions. When you bury shame, you also lose access to joy. When you suppress grief, you mute your capacity for love. You were never meant to live in fragments. You were meant to live whole. Embracing your shadow is how you begin to return to wholeness. Jung believed that the process of individuation, the journey of becoming our true selves, required us to make peace with the shadow. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." Integration. That's the word. Not erasing the shadow, not fixing it, not pretending it's not there, but inviting it to the table. And when you do, something powerful happens. You start to reclaim parts of yourself that have been missing. You feel more grounded, more honest, more alive. Because you're no longer hiding behind a mask. And no, this doesn't mean you start acting out every dark impulse. Embracing your shadow doesn't mean you start yelling when you're angry or giving in to every negative thought. It means you pause. You ask, why am I feeling this? What is this really about? You become curious instead of judgmental. You listen to your inner world instead of silencing it. And slowly, the shame begins to loosen. The fear softens. And you start to realize you are not your worst thoughts. You are not your past mistakes. You are not the version of yourself that had to survive in chaos. You are the one who made it through. And that shadow? It carried you here. That's why embracing your shadow is not a step backward. It's the bravest step forward you can take. It's an act of reclamation, of saying, I will no longer abandon myself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy, even when the world tells me to be someone easier, someone shinier, someone quieter. Real growth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence. And presence means being willing to sit with all of you, not just the parts that are easy to love. Many people find their first access point to the shadow through journaling. Not the curated kind, the raw, unfiltered writing where you let the truth pour out without censoring it. Write what you're angry about. Write what you wish you could say. Write the version of you that's tired of pretending. Others find it in therapy, where a skilled guide can help you trace the roots of your patterns, witness your pain without judgment, and support you in seeing that what you buried is still worthy of love. And for some, it's creative expression, painting, music, dance. The kind of creation that doesn't aim to please, but to release. Because sometimes the shadow speaks through movement and metaphor long before it speaks in words. There's research today that supports this too. Studies on expressive writing, internal family systems therapy, and somatic healing all show that giving voice to our inner conflicts leads to measurable improvement in mental health, self-awareness, and emotional resilience. We are finally catching up to what Jung knew 100 years ago. The shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It transforms when it's met with compassion. There are people who've lived their entire lives running from themselves. People who've worn masks so long they forgot who they were beneath them. But then, something cracks. A loss. A burnout. A relationship that ends. And in that quiet collapse, the shadow emerges. And if they're brave enough to turn toward it, what they find isn't just pain. It's purpose. I've met people who, after facing their deepest fears, became the most grounded, empathetic, creative souls. People who turned their trauma into poetry, their rage into advocacy, their grief into connection. Because here's the secret. Your shadow doesn't just hold your wounds. It holds your gifts, your intuition, your depth, your authenticity, your power. The very things you were taught to hide are often the things the world needs most from you. So when you begin to embrace your shadow, you don't just find healing. You find yourself, not the version you were told to be, but the version you were born to be. And that is the beginning of becoming whole. Let's move now into how to begin that integration. Because once we've seen the shadow, once we've welcomed it into the light, what we do next matters just as much as the realization itself. So we've met the shadow. We've begun to understand that it's not our enemy. It's a forgotten part of us, quietly waiting to be seen. But now comes the deeper question. What do we do with it? Because it's one thing to acknowledge the shadow. It's another to live in harmony with it, to integrate it, to bring it home. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Integration is how we stop calling it fate. It's how we stop repeating the same painful cycles, self-sabotaging relationships, quiet resentment, unexplained fear, sudden rage. It's how we begin to live intentionally instead of reactively. And it starts with this simple but powerful truth. You are not just your light. You are also your shadow. And you need both to become whole. You might be wondering, how do I actually integrate my shadow? What does that even look like in everyday life? It begins with awareness, real, radical awareness. Start by noticing your emotional triggers, not just the big ones, but the subtle moments too. When do you feel irritated, jealous, defensive, ashamed? What patterns keep playing out in your life? Where do you feel most stuck? Instead of judging yourself for those reactions, get curious. Ask yourself, what part of me is speaking right now? What is it trying to protect? Sometimes your shadow will sound like a critical voice in your head. Sometimes it shows up as procrastination or perfectionism. Sometimes it's the side of you that avoids conflict at all costs, or the one that secretly craves control. Each time, it's an invitation, not a condemnation. You can even begin practicing with a simple tool, the shadow journal. Each day, write down a moment where you felt emotionally triggered. Then ask, what emotion came up for me? What thoughts followed? What did I want to say, but didn't? And most importantly, where might this feeling be coming from? Not in the moment, but from my past. You'd be amazed how much truth you uncover when you stop editing yourself. And here's something powerful. Many of the traits we judge most harshly in others are often reflections of our own denied shadow. This is called projection, a key concept in Jung's work. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So the next time someone gets under your skin, ask yourself gently, what am I really seeing in them? And why does it bother me so much? You'll start to see that much of what we think is out there is really in here. Now, integration also requires forgiveness, but not just of others, of ourselves. Many of us carry guilt for the things we said in anger, the ways we lashed out when we were scared, the bridges we burned when we didn't yet know how to handle our pain. We judge ourselves harshly, thinking that shame is the only way to be accountable. But real accountability doesn't come from shame. It comes from understanding. When you realize that your shadow was never trying to destroy your life, but was simply trying to protect you the only way it knew how, you begin to soften. You begin to see your past behaviors not as signs of brokenness, but as signals of unmet needs. That's where the healing begins. Another path to integration is through creative expression. The arts offer us a safe place to let our shadow speak. Uncensored, wild, free. Some of the greatest art, music, poetry, and storytelling comes from a confrontation with the shadow. If you've ever read something that made you feel seen in your darkest moment, you've already witnessed the power of someone else's integrated shadow. So pick up a pen, paint something messy, dance without choreography, create without the pressure to make it beautiful. That's where truth lives. And then there's the role of therapy. Jungian analysis, internal family systems, IFS, and parts work are incredible tools to help you safely explore your unconscious. These approaches allow you to meet your shadow not as a threat, but as an inner part that simply wants attention and healing. Recent psychological studies have shown that people who engage in shadow work, especially when supported by trained professionals, experience increased emotional regulation, better interpersonal relationships, and even improved physical health. Why? Because suppressing your truth is exhausting. And when you stop doing it, your entire nervous system starts to breathe again. Here's the beautiful irony. The more you integrate your shadow, the more human you become. And paradoxically, the more divine you begin to feel. You become more empathetic because you know what pain feels like. You become more grounded because you're no longer trying to outrun your own story. You become more powerful, not because you dominate others, but because you're no longer fragmented within yourself. Jung believed that the integration of the shadow is what gives birth to the self, the true, authentic center of who you are, not the ego, not the persona, but the self, the wholeness that includes all things, even the contradictions. And from that place, something amazing happens. You begin to make choices not out of fear, but out of alignment. You stop chasing validation and start choosing authenticity. You stop being afraid of failure because you understand that every fall holds its own kind of truth. This is how your shadow stops holding you back and starts pointing you forward. Because once you've made peace with your inner darkness, you stop being controlled by it. And in its place, something fierce and beautiful rises. Clarity, confidence, purpose. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to be whole. So the next time your shadow surfaces, don't run. Don't suppress. Don't shame yourself. Breathe. Listen. Ask. What do you need from me right now? That's the work. And that's how you turn your shadow into your superpower. Let's now step into the final chapter, where we learn how to live in harmony with our shadow. Not as a temporary healing project, but as a lifelong companion on this road to purpose, peace, and personal transformation. So here we are. You've taken a journey most people never even begin. You've looked inward, not just into the easy, sunlit parts of your personality, but into the dimly lit corridors where pain, fear, anger, and shame quietly live. And what you found wasn't a monster, but a misunderstood part of yourself that had been longing to come home. This is what it means to live in harmony with your shadow. Not to conquer it, not to pretend it doesn't exist, but to walk with it, to acknowledge its presence and let it teach you. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And now that you've made your darkness conscious, the work shifts from discovery to relationship. The truth is, your shadow won't disappear just because you've noticed it. It's not something you heal once and forget. It's a lifelong companion, evolving as you evolve. Living in harmony with your shadow means staying in dialogue with it, checking in, listening, asking, is there something I'm not facing? Something I'm denying, suppressing, or projecting? It means building a habit of reflection, noticing your patterns, celebrating your growth. Yes, but also being honest about where you still feel reactive, triggered, or afraid. It means learning to pause before you judge yourself, and to recognize that old coping mechanisms weren't signs of failure. They were signs of survival. We all carry wounds. We all have scars from childhood, from heartbreak, from failure. And your shadow will often carry the echoes of those scars. But instead of pushing them away, you can offer them a seat at the table. You can say, I see you. I know why you're here. Let's do this together. Because your shadow holds wisdom too. Your shadow is the part of you that tells you when your boundaries are being violated. The shadow is not your enemy. It's not something to defeat or destroy. It's part of your soul's blueprint, a messenger carrying wisdom from the parts of yourself you've left behind. When you live in harmony with your shadow, you stop seeing your flaws as shameful. You stop pretending to be someone you're not. And in that honesty, you find strength. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. But every time you choose honesty over perfection, every time you say, yes, this is part of me, and I'm still worthy, you take a step toward wholeness. Shadow work has been shown to reduce anxiety, increase self-esteem, and improve relationships. Not because it makes life easier, but because it makes you braver. Your dark side isn't a mistake. It's a compass. It points you to what needs healing, what's been forgotten, and what's waiting to be reclaimed. So the next time you feel triggered or ashamed or afraid of your own emotions, pause. Listen. There's a gift in that darkness. Carl Jung reminded us, in all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. And within your shadow is a seed of purpose. You're not broken. You're becoming. If this resonated with you, I invite you to share your story in the comments. What part of your shadow have you met lately? And what did it teach you? This is your journey now. You don't have to walk it alone. Start today, one truth at a time. I hope this video was helpful. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or experiences. Thanks for watching.